What's up, everybody? Jack here with another episode of the Big and Bold College Football Show, and of course today is for my Wolverine fans. Today's episode is going to be a two-parter, so it's going to start off with my overview of the Northern Illinois game, which is going to be fairly condensed, and then we're going to get into my Rutgers preview for this upcoming Saturday, in order to avoid chopping it up into two separate episodes. I'm also going to do that for my college football overview from the past weekend in the first half of that episode, and then preview this upcoming weekend in the second half of the episode. So it's going to be a little easier to watch in that way. Just one episode dedicated to the previous weekend and the upcoming weekend, instead of chopping it up into separate episodes. So with that, I'm going to talk about my three main points I had going into the Northern Illinois game, and we're going to look at how did the Wolverines come through with those. Did they fulfill those 3 points that I had going into the game? And then I'm going to do the same thing for my Rutgers preview. I have 3 things I want to see out of that game. So let's start with a quick overview of that Northern Illinois game. Now, of course, the Wolverines dominated Northern Illinois 63-10. This was their easiest game on their schedule, and everyone pretty much expected a blowout. Now, my first point for the game was let Cade continue to try and throw the football, let the passing game work early on, and then try to cut up that Northern Illinois secondary. In the first quarter, it was more of the same from the Michigan offense. Obviously, this is what everyone's worried about with the Wolverines, right? Is that people are excited, they're getting their hopes up, but it looks like Michigan's struggling to throw the football. Now they're just reluctant to do so because their run game is so good, and they don't want to put the ball in harm's way. No matter how you look at it, they only attempted about 25 passes in their first 2 games, with starting quarterback Cade McNamara. In this Northern Illinois game, like I said, the first quarter was more of the same, primarily running the football. And then in the second quarter, after Hassan Haskins scored 2 touchdowns, and the Wolverines were up 28-3, they finally let Cade throw the football. They had about 2 drives in the second quarter where they just had Cade slinging the ball. And mixed results. Early on in the game, he tried to hit Cornelius Johnson, but referees missed a pass interference on Johnson. A little bad luck on another attempt to hit him deep. But finally, in the second quarter, Cade McNamara hit Cornelius Johnson for an 87-yard touchdown. It was a very well-thrown ball over the defender. Cornelius Johnson made the great catch and then took it down the sideline with his speed for the touchdown. So that was encouraging. Cornelius Johnson ended up being their leading receiver of the day with 3 catches for 117 yards and that touchdown, with no other receiver really having much of an impact in the game. Meanwhile, Cade McNamara was 8 for 11 for 191 yards and a touchdown. So obviously the majority of that production came on the 1 pass to Cornelius Johnson. So the passing game, they're not using it a whole lot, and when they are, it looks average. You know what I mean? It looks probably average at best, but I don't think it's anemic. And hopefully when they need it to be, it can be consistent. So overall, they did an okay job of letting Cade throw the ball. I wish it was a little more organic to how they want to run their offense, because it would appear that Michigan simply wants to be a run on first down, run on second down, and if it's within 3rd and 4, they're probably going to run it on 3rd down. That's just how the offense is going to run, and when it's working well, that's fine. We'll see if that continues. Now, my second point was get some interceptions. Rocky Lombardi had a career game against the Wolverines last year with Michigan State, over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now with Northern Illinois, fully expect them to dominate Rocky Lombardi. Last week against Wyoming, which is now the previous week now that I'm recording this, 3 interceptions in that game. So I expected the Wolverines to come up with some interceptions in this football game. And they ended up getting their first interception of the season against Lombardi by way of Jamon Green, who almost returned it for a touchdown. Not to mention Brad Hawkins dropped, granted it was a really bad drop, but he dropped an interception as well in the game. So that was kind of unfortunate. He almost came up with a big turnover. But Michigan did get their first interception of the season, which is something I was hoping they would do going in, so that's good there. But you still see some pretty bad dropped passes by the secondary. If they were better at catching the ball, I guess they'd be wide receivers, right? So the potential is there. They're in the right place to get these turnovers. It's just not happening yet. And then my third point was rotate that depth chart, keep guys healthy, and improve your depth by putting young players on the field. And boy, did they. I mean, that was probably the most evident thing in this game. They started the second half with a lot of freshmen, young players. I mean, you had 11 different guys carry the football. Granted, some of that was, quarterback Dan Villari, J.J. McCarthy had a carry. But they were getting down to running backs, freshman Tavir Dunlap, 3-star freshman out of Texas. Isaiah Gash, a player who I haven't talked about this past offseason or so far this season, but he saw some carries. So overall, a lot of guys touched the football. They got freshmen out there at wide receiver, Christian Dixon, 4-star receiver from California. He was able to catch a pass in the game. And they had a whopping 28 different players register a tackle. Freshmen like Jaden Hood, TJ Guy, Junior Colson, just plenty of young players getting on the field, rotating young guys on the offensive line. And they just want to keep guys fresh and keep guys healthy. And they didn't need to run anybody into the ground. I said that about specifically Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. That's their bread and butter right there, the Thunder and Lightning duo. So don't run them into the ground to beat Northern Illinois. And they didn't. Blake Corum had 13 carries, Hassan Haskins had 9. Both, by the way, having a great game. In fact, Michigan was a touchdown away from tying the school's all-time record for rushing touchdowns in a game. In fact, they would have tied it if a penalty didn't bring a rushing touchdown back, unfortunately. But they ended the game with 373 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground, just to highlight how dominant the run game has been lately. So ultimately, they checked all the boxes I wanted. I just wish that with Cade throwing the football, it would have been a little more organic to the offense and how they want to run their offense on a regular basis. But it would appear that they're not likely to use Cade McNamara in that way unless they're down on the scoreboard and really have to throw the ball. Or they're in a 3rd and long and they have to throw the football. But with that, my biggest takeaways for the offense, and I have 2 for the offense and 2 for the defense. Blake Corum is officially a Heisman candidate. Okay, and that's pretty obvious at this point. But with over 400 yards and 7 touchdowns in 3 games, he's averaging over 8 yards a carry. And that's not to mention what he's done through the air as well. Blake Corum is definitely getting into that Heisman conversation. But it doesn't matter how good you are in 3 games. It matters how good you are over the course of the season. So let's see what he does this week against Rutgers. But my second point is Cornelius Johnson is officially their number 1 wide receiver. So that's kind of shown itself. I think he is now Cade McNamara's first read with Ronnie Bell gone with injury. And that was another question we had, is who's going to step up for them? And it would appear that it's Cornelius Johnson. He reminds me a lot of Nico Collins. I think they have similar ceilings. But if they get the passing game going, I think that he could be that 1,000-yard receiver for the Wolverines. And my points for the defense, again, more dropped passes that you don't like to see by the secondary. But hopefully that means that over the course of the season they'll get better at that. And we're going to start seeing more interceptions. And, they play soft in their secondary, but very aggressive up front. It's different from Don Brown's scheme. Don Brown said, hey, if 4 pass rushers don't get there, send 5, send 6. And then you've got man coverage in your secondary. Teams figured out his blitzes, and they figured out how to beat that man coverage in the secondary, and it just wasn't working. So now you have this soft zone coverage. The blitzes are a little bit more unique, I think. And I don't think they've opened up the box yet either for this team from a play calling perspective. So overall, Michigan did dominate. Easy win. Not going to waste too much time on that because, again, this was their easiest game on their schedule. The run game is as dominant as ever. The defense looked good. Really no complaints here. And now let's move on to this Rutgers preview. Spend about 10 minutes on that as well, and we'll close out the episode. When you look at Rutgers this season, they've dominated 2 opponents. They're 3-0 this season. Greg Schiano, he's back at Rutgers. He had them all the way up to, I think, the number 2 team in the country at one point in his previous stint with the program. Now he's back at Rutgers trying to steer the ship for a program that's in disarray. I mean, Rutgers was the laughingstock of the Big Ten. Now Greg Schiano's trying to turn things around, and they're off to a strong 3-0 start. The thing when it comes to Rutgers is they've beat Temple, Syracuse, and Delaware. So Michigan is obviously the biggest challenge this season for the Scarlet Knights. But my 3 key points for this game: 1, Noah Vedral. starting quarterback for Rutgers, had a career game like Rocky Lombardi last season when Michigan traveled on the road to go play Rutgers. He had over 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception in that game, and is a huge reason why it went into overtime, and the Wolverines almost lost that game last season. So they need to give him that sort of Rocky Lombardi treatment, right? Create turnovers, get in his face, get pressures, get sacks. Show people that last year was a fluke. I think most already understand that at this point with the start that the Wolverines are off to. But they did it against Rocky Lombardi. They said, yeah, Rocky Lombardi is not going to have that kind of a game in the big house like he did last year. And boy, did he not. Now, of course, he's with Northern Illinois, no longer with Michigan State. But Michigan still held him to 46 yards, 1 touchdown and an interception through the air. Very different from the game he had last season with the Spartans. And I expect the same in this case. I want them to dominate Rutgers and kill that passing game. Continue to build up confidence for this defense with new defensive coordinator Mike McDonald. Second, and this one again is kind of an obvious one, but Blake Corum is becoming a Heisman candidate. He's already in that conversation, but it's faint whispers. Continue that dominance that he's having. And not only do it because it's winning them football games and because he's officially the star of this offense, but it's good for the fan base. It's good for the media looking at the Michigan to have that Heisman candidate, to have an elite offensive playmaker on the team. Same can be said for Aiden Hutchinson on defense, right? It's nice to have a high-end elite player on both sides of the ball. And Michigan has that in Blake Corum. As I said with his stats earlier, he's off to an incredible start, and the best we've seen for a Michigan running back since Mike Hart was at the University of Michigan, who of course is their running back coach now. So continue that. I want to see Blake Corum have double-digit touchdowns after 4 games. I want to see him break 500 yards on the season after 4 games. Let him have a big performance. And of course, Rutgers is going to try to stop him. That's going to be their big emphasis, is stop the Michigan run game. Don't let that happen. Run down Rutgers' throat, which I believe they will. Have a great game. And my last point, this is kind of a 2-point thing. Michigan's biggest game of the season is coming up after this Rutgers game. Michigan will be going to Madison, Wisconsin to play the Badgers, a place where Michigan hasn't won since 2001. So that's a huge game, considering Michigan's now jumped into the top 25, sitting at 19th in the AP poll. The Wolverines need to go out and sew up any issues they think they have with their team in this game. If they think there are some holes in their secondary, work on that against Rutgers. If they think they need to get more reps in their passing game, do it against Rutgers. Because this is your last opportunity before you play a top 25 Big Ten opponent to fix in-game whatever you need to adjust. And with that, the second part of my final kind of overarching topic, don't overlook Rutgers. Don't get ahead of yourself and just look to that Wisconsin game. Because those players know where they are. They know where their program is. They know they were being slept on coming into the year. They know they're being disrespected. And now they're off to a great start, and they're the 19th team in the country. And they have a big test coming up against Wisconsin. Not to mention Wisconsin's dominated the Wolverines the last 2 seasons. But they can't look past Rutgers. Because that program and Greg Schiano and those players would love to have an iconic win over a top 25 Michigan team. A Michigan team that's pulled recruits away from Rutgers from the East Coast, a team that's dominated Rutgers in the past, a team that narrowly got away with a win last year against Rutgers. And Rutgers doesn't care if this is the Wolverines' homecoming game or if it's in the big house. They just want to win. So don't forget about this game, because that's the last thing we want, is to get caught up in the momentum of the season, to look ahead to that Wisconsin game, that Michigan State game, and forget about it somebody like Rutgers. And this is probably a point that I'm going to bring up moving forward, going on the road to Nebraska, playing a Northwestern team that's down on their luck this year. So finally, I want to look at, I'm not going to break down the entire Rutgers team, but I want to look at 2 key players for this matchup. And the first is wide receiver Bo Melton. Leading wide receiver for Rutgers. He's off to a good start this year. He had a touchdown catch against Temple, 125 yards and a touchdown against Delaware. He's a very experienced player for the Scarlet Knights because Bo Melton is easily their number one target for this offense. So you shut him down and you more or less can shut down their passing game. And then next up, I've got linebacker Olukunle Fatukasi. I'm pretty sure I said that right. Stud linebacker for them. Sneaky good linebacker for Rutgers. Another player that's been with the program for some time. Another guy, 7 tackles and 3 sacks against Temple. Went absolutely nuclear. Had 9 tackles and half a sack against Delaware. A big 12-tackle game against Syracuse. He's an impact defender for them and a legit talent and a leader for them. So they need to shut down number 3. If Fatukasi has a big game, if Bo Melton has a big game, then the Wolverines are struggling. So keep an eye out for Fatukasi in this football game and see if he has an impact or not. Because if he doesn't, Wolverines should be dominating that Rutgers defense. And actually a little bit of breaking news as well about this game. Rutgers is going to be without their number 1 corner, Max Melton. He's actually been arrested, suspended from the football team. Not going to go too deep into the why for that situation. But he's a talented young player for them that got himself into some trouble with the university. So he will not be playing in this game. He leads the team with 2 interceptions. So his presence is definitely going to be missed in this football game. I expect Michigan to dominate. That little bit of information kind of helps. I've got Michigan winning 34-10. I originally had this 37-14, but I'm going to take the Wolverines 34-10 in this one. I don't think that their offense goes crazy in this game because I think Rutgers could potentially give them their biggest challenge of the year. If they dominate Rutgers, then never mind. You know what I mean? But I'll take the Wolverines to win this game by 24 points easily. And with that, guys, that is my episode for the day. Went over that Northern Illinois game a little bit. Got into this Rutgers game they've got coming up this Saturday. I believe it's a 3:30 Eastern time game, not a noon kickoff like we usually get. And with that, keep an eye open for my other episode I have coming this week if you're interested in some of the big games that were played last weekend and some of the big games coming up this weekend. Next week is going to be a little different with how I do my episodes. I think I talked about this in last week when how I want to deliver content. I'm going to do a quick overview of how this game went, and then I'm going to have a big preview for the Wisconsin game. I'm going to really try to make this a great preview for you guys, break down all the ins and outs of this game, and give you my honest opinion of how it's going to go. So thanks, Wolverine fans, for listening. This has been a fun one. Please check out my other episode for the Big and Bold College Football Show, and I will talk to you guys later.